Now, we are about 5 minutes past the hour. Let's go ahead and get started. I think we all know each other here. I see all familiar faces right now, so I think we can skip the intros today. And I'll just hand the mic off to Ed, who is first up on the agenda.
Could you enable sharing so I can share the agenda?
Yes. Should be turned on now.
Okay. Excellent. Can you see the agenda?
Yep.
Cool. So this is all just the standard reminder, in terms of, opening the floor for outreach to build your build communities. We do have a spreadsheet to track that. So please, if you've got connectivity to various build tool communities, do reach out to them. Do add yourself to the spreadsheet so that we can actually track that here. And then there was, I believe Vicky had made a comment about looking at some meeting notes to see if OpenSSF, there was an OpenSSF group trying to also put together such a list. And I looked at the meeting notes, and I am sometimes blind, but I did not see anything on that in the meeting notes that looked like that. So I just had that, left that here as something to mention because I didn't want to just silently drop the key suggestion.
I think that is the wrong meeting link.
Always possible. Oh, we should probably also mention two things to folks. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube.
Yep.
And also, we keep a fairly flexible agenda. Feel free to add things to it, particularly if you're among the sort of POCs folks. Feel free to add something if you want to update us on how you're doing in the various POCs to the agenda.
Yep, absolutely. I'm going to try and find the other meeting that I think Vicky was referring to, since that came up in the context of the OpenSSF TAC meeting this morning as well. My understanding of that OpenSSF working group is they are trying to describe or define a way to work with other open source communities to gather feedback on which projects are most important to go do security work in. And that this wouldn't be a one-time thing, it'd be an ongoing dialogue between the OpenSSF and those other communities. Maybe OpenSSF would have a formula they could periodically run against open source repos to calculate criticality or a heat map, if you will, and then not just assume that that's accurate, but then go vet it with a domain expert in that group or that language or whatever it is. And I think Vicky's point was the paradigm of engagement that they're developing might be one we could also leverage.
Sounds great. Cool. So that was it for me on reaching out to build tool communities, unless folks have new stuff to add or want to raise something. So shall we move on then to POCs? Cool. So I think, Yonkui, you had wanted to show some things with BOMsh and reproducible builds, and you've asked for 15 minutes to do so.
Yeah.
Do we think we're good with 15 minutes at this point? Okay, cool. Do you want to share, Yonkui?
Yeah, I want to share my screen.
Yep, let me stop sharing then.
Okay. Can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So today I want to talk about gitbom and reproducible build. So, a lot of Linux packages are already build reproducible. That means byte-to-byte identical binaries are rebuilt when the same build environment is reproduced. Actually, already 95% of that Debian packages are build reproducible now, and future Debian Linux distros may enforce reproducible build. The Bomsh tool can record the build steps of these build reproducible packages and generate the gitbom documents without altering the generated binary files. So I will show an example with the hostname package. So I download the official Debian package from the Ubuntu repo, and also I locally recreate the Debian package. You can see they are exactly the same. Here are the gitbom documents we have generated for the hostname package. 3 gitbom document generated. And we, the Bomsh tool, also generate the gitbom doc mapping file, which is the metadata, and it records the mapping from the git hash of the generated binary file to its gitbom ID or the gitbom document. You can see here the green color one is for the hostname Debian package, and the red color one is for the generated binary file hostname. So if we assign this gitbom doc mapping file and provide access to users, for example, where extra packaging or website access, then this will achieve the same effect as embedding a .bomb section into the binary file itself. So this means that gitbom can work well with a reproducible build, so that gitbom can be used immediately, ready for use by people for these already released software. But the key point here is that we don't embed the .bomb section into the generated binary file itself, so that we can keep the reproducible build property. So with using this approach, I think we can create a repo, gitbom repo, to store the gitbom documents for these already released software. So when such a gitbom repo is available, then people will be motivated to create more metadata to associate with the gitbom artifact tree. And this will create a positive feedback cycle, which will greatly help the wide adoption of gitbom. Actually, we already create such gitbom repo on GitHub. So here, here you can see we already create generate the gitbom documents for some of those Debian packages, hostname, OpenSSL, systat. We already reproduced build for Linux kernel tool, but I didn't upload here yet. So for example, for this hostname 3.23 version, and here's the metadata for Bomsh. So you can see this file contains all the mapping, and the objects you can see they are put here. So if we have such a repo, then for all the, in most of the existing links buried on users' Linux machine, they can just come to our repo to just input the Git hash, then they will be to retrieve the whole artifact tree for the Linux buried. So the goal here, I'm thinking that we can create a website like this software heritage project or website. You can see you can input just the Git hash or the checksum and then retrieve the software projects or source code. For us, we can just let user have API like that to access the repo using the Git hash of the Linux and automatically retrieve the gitbom artifact tree. So that's basically what I have. Yeah, any questions? Yeah, sure.
So I think this is an absolutely phenomenal idea. And having, being able to both submit and query hashes to kind of see where you are in the global Merkle tree, that's awesome. The concern that I have is poisoning the tree. So how, and this is beyond your presentation, but perhaps maybe a topic for next week's discussion. Yep. How do we start signing and securing things so that we know the provenance of a particular assertion of hash to code to build? And I think it, Ed, Ava, anybody else, does that strike a chord, or am I barking up a crazy tree again?
So there's the issue of signing evidence. I would view this as, to borrow terminology from the IETF, this is a claim, right? Yonghui has performed a local task, generated an assertion here, and then uploads it somewhere to a store, maybe GitHub, and is making a claim that this build can be reproduced, and here is the artifact tree for it. That could be signed in some way. That claim could be signed. That's a set of evidence that other people might then download and evaluate, compare to their own reproducible processes. We could even imagine that Debian repositories might include such information, kind of like a build info file, a bomb info file, alongside their .deb files or whatever else is up on a mirror. How the signing is done and how the distribution of evidence is done, I am imagining separately from Gitbom's own file format here, but totally valid, definitely a thing to consider. And the reason I say separate is there are several other efforts that I think Ed and I are both aware of already tackling this. I'm not sure the best place to connect to it, though.
So maybe I'll do a little bit of research over the course of the week and ask if I, come up with anything worthy of discussion. I'll ask for some time next week.
So Jeremy had his hand up. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, my question was basically, how does this connect with SigStore? Like, are they overlapping in this area, or are they distinct? I guess I'm not quite sure.
So I can speak to my personal attitude, which is that there are definitely things that are going to have to be done around signing of artifacts and also around making claims about build processes. There are existing people working on those problems, like SigStore you mentioned for signing artifacts. I believe in Toto is looking at how do you actually make signed assertions about build steps. And my personal inclination would be that we don't necessarily need to reinvent a wheel, only this time triangular for those things. We should hopefully be able to use some of what exists in those particular areas. I think part of what's actually worked really nicely for us is keeping ourselves narrowly focused on artifact trees. And there are definitely things you want to do around them, as Yunkui pointed out, but rather than inventing new ways to do those things, look out into the world of the ways that are getting traction. Does that make sense, Jeremy?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I think a gitbom gives you a nice, clean, well-defined API, or identifier, or at least ultimately that will be the goal. And then, if you want to incorporate that into a SIG store chain or something like that, then that's a really nice kind of like connection place. So if you wanted to use, it seems to me like if you wanted to use SIG store to record a claim, as Ava put it, then that seems like a good fit to me, so long as my understanding of SIG store is actually correct. But I think
we may also want to get Santiago to come and talk about in toto, because my understanding, which is perfect for both in toto and SIG store, mind you, is that in toto is possibly a somewhat better fit, because my very, very thumbnail notion with SIG store and in toto is SIG store says, I have signed this artifact. And in toto says, I'm the guy who built this artifact, and this is what I'm going to tell you and assert about what happened when I built it. Or I'm the guy who tested it, and this is what I'm going to assert about what I did when I tested it. That kind of thing.
I see. That's interesting. I don't know about that. Like, I think my general concern is that, in general, we won't be able to make any sort of like, we don't want to be able to trust any of the tools that generate these gitbom things. And so really the only way of validating is the fact that you can do a reproduce the build. And, if someone claims that this compiler and this source has produced this output and you can reproduce that, then that's proof of that claim. So this reproducible build work is super helpful for that.
There was a proof of concept shared, I think it was around November, so a few months ago now, using SIG store's tooling to verify or to plus Debian reproducible builds, right? So if multiple parties build the same Debian package and upload their individual signatures of it, right? So if I sign a package with a certain name and a certain hash, and I upload that signature, I'm not uploading the binary. Debian's already done that. I'm uploading my signature of that step in the build. And so do you, and so do you. Then someone else who's installing it can compare, the Debian keyring signed it, and Ava signed it, and Ed signed it. All the signatures match with the same evidence and the same attestation or same claim. So I probably trust it. Yep. And while one could make an argument that more people saying the same thing makes it true, I would argue that that's not actually a valid logical position, right? It's pretty easy to game a system if you're only looking for, have 10 people claimed this build is valid, but I don't know who those 10 people are. So there's a bigger conversation there around SIG store's approach versus in toto's approach. Do you trust the reproducible builds in the commons? Do you trust specific people or entities to do a secure build? And then as a consumer of these, how do you verify the claims made by different groups? So that's a big conversation. I think, gitbom is trying to stay focused and not step in that field, let it get solved and let people sign this and upload it. I don't see any reason why someone couldn't sign a gitbom tree and sign it in a way that is published via SIG store or via, let's say, Node-RE v2, which there's work in progress there also to support signing of claims on container images. Hopefully that rant made sense to somebody.
So can I summarize my understanding? There are a number of pieces in this kind of overall space. We don't want to reproduce them, but we do want to associate with appropriate ones. And we're not sure exactly which ones are appropriate, but we can kind of, incrementally move towards that. Is that a reasonable summary?
Yes, very much. And this might be an incentive for me to go update my open source supply chain security landscape, which is trying to summarize all of this kind of muddiness of the water.
Would it be possible for you to share that? Thank you.
I can stop sharing. I think I'm done.
Okay.
Well, this was really cool stuff, and I love the reproducibility.
Thanks.
Yeah, David, I just dropped a link to my supply chain synthesis repo. PRs, issues, comments, all welcome.
Thank you.
In a little bit buried in there is a sort of a map, or a couple different maps synthesizing the overall landscape. The first one there is the one that I'm most proud of. And just out of scope for gitbom, but hopefully helpful to folks who are trying to understand the wide variety of stuff happening in this space and how they all fit together.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other thing that pops into my head is as this stuff then becomes part of proprietary software, where it's not possible for 2 or 3 trustable entities to share potential reproducibility, you know, that how do we address that as well? And Jeff, this goes into a lot of the work that you're doing at Cisco. In other words, you know, Cisco isn't going to be open sourcing router software, for example, or firewall software, but we see, I'm still part of Cisco, at least mentally. I believe that Cisco should be able to publish gitboms of internal artifacts as part of the overall kind of Merkle tree or Merkle forest.
Yeah, given the executive order, everyone is trying to produce SBOMs and signatures for artifacts for their commercial software or firmware.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think back to Jeremy's point, though, one of the interesting sort of checksums that you have when you have reproducible builds, at least in the open source, is if you're really suspicious, build it yourself.
Well, that actually leads to a very nice auditability property, which is, okay, you know, you randomly choose versions or releases or whatever, and we have the compute infrastructure to be able to go and do that. We, you know, kind of the royal global we, to say, okay, you know, 0.1% of all open source packages we're going to verify. I don't know who this we is, but, you know, it does lend itself to kind of that property, and it might also lend itself to reputational scores.
Well, you could also see community service auditing, right?
Yeah.
Various entities that have lots of compute power available saying, look, you know, we're going to go sort of stochastically walking through the forest, checking things. And of course, you know, if things don't check out, now we have some reason to be at least somewhat suspicious of the submitter and signer of these things. Now, not certainty, because mistakes do happen. But no, that gets to be very, very interesting. So that is an exciting way to look at things. Do we have friends in the direction of some of the reproducible build Debian stuff who might be interested in this?
We do. Chris Lamb and I have already spoken about it. I tried to entice him to join these meetings. I think it's just a scheduling and time zone thing. So I'm going to drop him a note after this with a link to Yongquai's work. And as soon as this recording is up, a link to the recording as well.
Excellent. Sounds great. Oh, as a side note, by the way, I am keeping up with putting the recorded meetings on YouTube,
Awesome.
but I didn't actually get that to close until late yesterday for last week. So I didn't tweet out about it.
Do we want to, for next time, invite either in toto, you know, Santiago or someone from SigStore to come talk about the potential overlap here?
I think it'd probably be good, yes, to do that. And it would be lovely to have Santiago back in the room. He's been on and off participating,
Yeah.
and sort of understands some of the scores, so makes an excellent person to engage with.
Actually, one of the interesting thing, one of the other random neuron firings was, does Azure have a program to donate unused compute cycles to open source or nonprofits or some other thingy?
Yes, we do. David, if you're asking about a different project, follow up with me directly. For Gitbom, we're not there yet.
Okay, this was in the abstract, not a
Great.
concrete ask, but if there exists a program,
There
then
does exist a program.
Okay.
Azure gives lots of credits to open source foundations for various things.
Yeah.
Cool.
So also, I also know from personal connections that Equinix Metal was looking at doing something similar. Primarily in terms of they have a situation where they've got a bunch of metal that is not new enough to sell, but not old enough to get rid of. They were looking for pro-social things to do with it at one point. And this might be something we could interest them in. So cool. Anything else on this particular POC?
Curiosity, how much work would it be for this repo or something similar to be written up in a way that the folks who are already doing reproducible builds for Debian could just glue this on the side and get it almost for free? Is it heading in that vein or not?
I think that's sort of a question for Young-Kui.
For me, for now, I just run the Debian rebuild script under Bomsh. Then I'm outside. But I know there are some bugs inside the Bomsh, so I need to fix that. But basically, the framework is already there. So it's I'm not sure. It's just like how you run S-trees, right? Same thing. It's not hard at all for them to use Bomsh.
And I'm sure it's true, because this is true with literally every open source project I've been available with. We could certainly keep turning the crank on usability in order to make it simpler and simpler to consume. It's often when you're trying to get a thing done, you go back and make a pass to make it easier for everybody else later. So
yeah,
great. Yeah, let's put this on the agenda for next week, assuming that I can get Chris to join us.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So other POCs that wanted to talk about things this week.
I have made some progress on the LLD implementation for gitbom. I'm just like one step away from being 100% complete. If there's a minute, I can just share my screen to show the update.
That would be fantastic. Let me go ahead and stop sharing.
Okay, you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right. So this is just a simple example. So I'm just trying to link two object files, A.O and B.O. And both of them have been compiled using the git-enabled clang. So you can see that it has a .bomb section embedded in, there is a .bomb section in both the object files. So then now I'm just going to try and link them using LLD. And again, I'm piggybacking on the linker option that computes the dependencies. So when I do that, this is just the debug output. As you can see, they're all different dependencies like CRT, B and CRT 1.0, etc. And these have not been compiled using the git-enabled toolchain, so they will not have a .bomb section in those object files. So this is the git ref. So I have okay. So this is the file that is generated by the linker. And you can see that only A.O and B.O have a BOM section, which is there, and the rest do not have a .BOM section. So they are left empty. And I think this is where there will be differences when we compare the, the git refs generated by different tool chains. We may or may not have the, the BOM sections in the objects that we link. So there might be some differences. I think it might be good. So the piece that I'm missing is when this git ref, right, this 9748 blah blah should be added to the .BOM section of the executable. That is, something is messed up, so it's not showing up. So that is the part that I'm trying to fix. Once that is done, I think the linker implementation can be considered fairly complete. I have to test different cases, like what if the archive is built using a Clang gitbom enabled toolchain, shared object is built using a gitbom enabled toolchain, and does it still show the BOM output in the final file? But yeah, this is where I am.
No, this is excellent. I'm excited because we're getting relatively close to a place where we could sit down and build something larger,
Yes.
and see all the pieces directly embedded as part of the build process, which gets us to sort of the ubiquity nirvana we're all hoping for, where it's like, do you have the artifact tree? Well, did you build it? Yes. Okay, you have the artifact tree.
I think the database could then be generated using Yonki's scripts, once all these objects and these .BOM directories are created, we could use his scripts to generate the database, because the format
this is one of the fun parts that I like about communities at this stage, is we're trying a bunch of different things and they're succeeding in different ways, and we're figuring out how they fit together and how they complement one another.
And I just found that there is a difference. I use the .BOM/.objects, and his tool probably uses .gitbom. These are trivial differences that can be fixed once we standardize on, what.
Yeah, that's.
What
Let me actually add that to something that needs to be discussed in the spec section. Maybe not this week, because we've had a very good week. But basically, so in terms of naming things, because that's one of those things where we need to arrive at an answer, but there are lots of little things we can discuss about what makes a good answer here, and there's always things to weigh back and forth. So, for example, if you call it .BOM, I think basically you would put it out, Yonkui, that if you call it .BOM, the directory, and you're also using that as the name of the directory that you would embed in archives, then there might be some collision. That's a consideration. If you call it .gitbom, then when you're tab completing .g, it's because you're looking for your Git directory. Now you've got two things coming up. So there's lots of little pieces in there, and I think we'll sort of sort that out in conversation most effectively. And like you said, that's all super easy to resolve. I'm not to resolve, but to change once we figure out what we want to do.
Yeah, and at the moment, the list of proofs of concept is small enough that changing it isn't too painful.
Yep.
Okay, if I give a very quick update on gitbom-rs. Work continues. We have the major data structures in place. I expect, and I'm going to write a command line interface to it. I expect I'll have something demonstrable at this meeting next week. I don't know why this means command line, but it does. Anyway, C is for command line.
C is for cookie. That's good enough for me.
And with that, I'm done.
Just watch your knee.
Any other POC updates that folks want to talk about today?
Well, one of the things I was thinking about, and this is probably not a goal for March, but maybe a potential goal for April, is to build 2 small distros that share some modules and see whether we can say, okay, we have these 2 entire trees for the distro. Can we find commonalities in the tree?
So
You know,
Debian and Alpine, for example.
yeah. Yeah.
That's a fun objective. I like objective-driven development.
It's odd. Get it? Objective-driven development.
It's true. I am odd.
Okay. This is so much better than conference-driven development.
David, would it be sufficient to pick a small number of packages in those distros rather than the entire distro?
Sure. I mean, I'm thinking like BusyBox and some other insanely small thing, or maybe just, you know,
Okay.
OpenSSL across 2 different distros.
I was thinking on the order of Youngquay's earlier demo of, like, you know, pick Bash and OpenSSH server package, right? A couple pretty standard things that are going to have some libraries in common, regardless of which platform you're on.
Yeah. And that also gets us into the, we've identified a vulnerability in a particular source code file.
Yep.
Can we then query to say, where is that source code file across things?
Yep. There is a project Google spun out that I learned about late last week, OSV or OVS. They're now running somewhat of a public-facing service for cross-referencing CVEs to commit hashes for open source projects. So it's not file hashes like we're doing, but the commit hash. But it's a step towards being able to do that. And had just, you know, dropped a bug in their ear as they were presenting, I guess in the Q&A phase of their presentation, like, hey, could you do this for file hashes? And they're like, we hadn't thought about doing that, but there's no reason that they couldn't. So that might be something, you know, a seed set of data where we don't have to go build our own.
Okay, well, that's actually a good idea. And probably also some people to go talk to about the Gitoid conversation as well.
Yep. And then the company White Source does have a commercial product that connects CVEs to file hashes, but I don't know that they'd want to give us their database.
Cool.
So could we enhance or have some augmentation to the gitbom spec that not only includes file hash, but also includes commit hash? No.
So no. It's an interesting idea to think about. But when you sort of roll it around, the commit hash is capturing informationally the entire tree. So there's a very interesting question about which commits, in other words, which trees in the universe contain these files. That's a super interesting question. But if you were to try and put the commit hash into the tree, there are now potentially infinitely many commit hashes that might contain the file that is turned up in your tree, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not thinking something that's hashable, but we were talking about like build tool version or command build parameters or other things being augmentations or metadata around. So
yes.
if we think about the commit hash as metadata.
Yep.
There we go. No, that's
yeah.
Good. Sorry.
I think we're probably both going to excitedly say the same thing. Storing the commit hash in the proposed like dot metadata structure. Totally think that's a good idea. It's valuable information, but it captures information that is orthogonal to the actual source code tree.
I also love the opportunity where if these types of databases become more available, that your IDE or code editor could literally flag these type of vulnerabilities for you and say, "Whoa, we noticed you're including this file. This you should watch out for these vulnerabilities because you may be affected." And it also paves the way once you start looking at some of the more context-specific ones, where because you have the actual commit that's available, the commit implies you can look at the previous version and try to work out which functions may possibly have added the and it's not always a guarantee. There's some noise here, but may have been the culprit that added the vulnerability. And so once you add in that type of tooling, we may be actually able to leverage it even further, where if someone were to replicate the same code somewhere else, like the same function, then that may end up being able to be flagged, even if the hashes don't end up committing. Like, this is a necessary step to get to that world.
So I'll see you and go you one better and feed that information back into the automated copy paste systems like GitHub Copilot, so that they can, just like Google Maps will give you kind of routing based on traffic. If we can basically give hints about vulnerabilities in particular code snippets because of their provenance, that becomes really interesting.
So, yes, Jeremy, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about a git hash, as you say, is it captures the entire state of the tree. And so I don't know if this is too edge case and too niche, but you can certainly imagine situations in which it's a combination of files that causes a problem, but each individual file hash on its own is fine. Like if you have version A that has a check in one file, and then you're doing a refactor and you're moving it into a different file, and you have an intermediate state in which you remove it from the first file but forget to put it into the second file. And so that combination of new first file and old second file introduces a problem, whereas each individual one is fine. And so you can't put too much assurance on individual file hashes as being flaggable as bad or not.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think the point you're making is that it may not be rooted, a particular CVE may be rooted in a collection of files, not a single file. And so you have to actually have all of them together in order for it to be a problem. Sort of the file equivalent of comorbidities.
Right. And a git hash is incredibly coarse because it is the entire state of the tree. But like coming up with subsets of a tree, which is like related files, I mean, that's a fine-grained thing that doesn't really exist in anything that I know of particularly.
Yeah. Well, and that's sort of the nice thing with the gitbom approach, is because you do get down to the blob hash of the individual files that get pulled up the tree. And then if you treat the commit hash as metadata on that, then it becomes useful and interesting information, but you don't sort of get the thing you're describing where, because a commit is incredibly coarse, in that there can be a bunch of stuff in there. Like I'm sure we've all seen poorly loved code bases that contain things that don't even get built anymore. Or it used to be a big problem back in the day with Postgres, where Postgres had a large contrib directory that was full of all kinds of detritus, some of which was licensed under terrible licenses, some of which was frankly highly dangerous. And so they've since cleaned their act up. But at the time, like if you were to look at a commit hash for a Postgres tree, like there was all kinds of bad things in that commit, but not the things that anybody ever built or used.
Rather in the tree at that point in time, not in the actual commit.
But
exactly.
You could easily imagine a predicate over a git bomb saying, like, if you see both this file and that file at the same time, then that indicates a problem.
Yes, and now we get into the places where we're going to have to go and teach set theory up to the CVE people.
Well,
so is NoSQL.
But I think it also leads into another interesting dichotomy between runtime analysis and static analysis. And everything that we've been talking about is static analysis. But if you have a map, the static analysis map, then you can do dynamic analysis to see, okay, it is actually the code intersection of A, B, and C. And going and looking at log4j, my guess is that there would be nothing vulnerable in log4j except for the intersection of, hey, we're going to add this nifty feature to this particular code path, and all of a sudden it became a vulnerability. It because it exposed the code path to external strings rather than programmer input strings. Sorry, was that coherent? Okay.
Entirely.
Yeah.
But that actually, it might be fun to talk to the Rust people about that, because they seem to understand the intersection between static analysis and dynamic analysis better than any other like programming language community I've seen.
There's a lot of cool work in it.
It may also be useful to look at not only where does the vulnerability injected, but what was the fix, and both of them combined may also give more context.
Yep. That I think is closer to how I've been thinking of the usefulness of correlating gitbom to CVEs. Once a CVE is issued and a fix is issued, you can bisect that change, right? Which files had to be changed to close the vulnerability? Of course, there's many ways to look at this.
Cool. So we're getting towards the end here, and we haven't even gotten to the spec section, which is what I refer to as crises of success. Things are going so well in the POC section that we have a lot going on there. You had mentioned, Ava, at some point, the possibility that we might have to break off a separate spec meeting. Is that something we would make sense to discuss now?
It certainly could. If we have, well, we seem to have had enough content in the general updates, interests, and POCs to not get much time for specs 2 or 3 weeks in a row now. That's been my sense, which would suggest maybe folks want another meeting for that. But I would turn that question to everyone here and say, do you have the time and desire for a separate meeting for spec work?
My input is I'd rather see a TikTok cadence.
Oh, that's actually an interesting idea.
Did I mishear that?
I'm not talking about the
You're not
I went there at first too.
I put my foot down.
David, I'm too old for that.
Maybe we have a cadence where every other week we do POCs and exploration, and every other week we kind of take the information from the prior week and see how that impacts the spec.
Okay.
But by the way, I don't think you're too old for that, because that was Intel's strategy for many years. And I think that you might be too young for that, but not too old for it.
Not what any of us meant.
I mean, I think if we could
thoughts
turn
or
the spec
opinions?
into a series of 30-second dance moves, then that would be great.
I'm sorry, Jeremy, could you repeat that, because I was blustering?
I was just saying, if we could turn the spec into a series of 30-second dances, then that would be amazing.
There we go.
I'll get right on that.
Now it's a moral imperative.
Yes. Keynote by 30-second dances. That feels achievable. I've done Ignite talks that are 15 seconds per slide. So, I think there were 2 or 3 different items listed up here. I guess 4 now. The UI URN discussion. I just flipped back to that tab, and Ed, I saw your post, your comment from last night. I think I'll just call everyone's attention to that. GitHub issue. It's looking like we want to head the direction of an IANA proposal. I don't see any problem with that. I need to go review it in more detail, but when I ran that idea past one of my colleagues who actually filed the IANA request for Git, his initial reaction was, yeah, that sounds appropriate and fine.
Yeah, I was pointed in that direction by one of our deep spec people, over here, just standards people over here, and their position was, and I think this is absolutely correct. At the very least, it's a good structure to talk about it, because the template sort of asks the right questions, even if you decide you don't want to go to IANA. So it feels like there's general consensus that the tick-tock between POC and spec is probably a really good idea. Is that the sort of consensus of the room, or are we going to have to hum about this? Awesome. So I think next time would be spec's turn. Now, for the folks doing POCs, are you comfortable with sort of reading out to the broader group every other week?
Absolutely. And I might put together screen demos and then put them in the gitbom Slack on the off weeks, or screen recordings.
Yeah, absolutely. Other comrades, I think, for the POCs are available as well to talk with amongst themselves and so forth. And I think also, you know, if any particular sub-community feels the need to go do its own meeting, you know, obviously we want to be supportive of that, but that's up to them.
Which does remind me to offer, if anyone here who's doing a POC wants, you know, sort of official project resources, repo on GitHub, a Zoom meeting time, things like that, just let me know. Right? Ed or I can help with most of those. As far as the actual spec repo goes, I have made, sadly, little progress on that since last week. I will try and get more done before next week.
So I do apologize. I have to drop. I've got a really hard stop at the end of this hour.
And it is just about the end, so let's wrap. Awesome. See you all next week for more discussion about specs.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.